Both Canadians and Americans share close ties and are pretty friendly neighbors, for the most part.
My favorite word.
Tariff! 25% tariffs on Canadian exports to the United States.
They're both filled with great people who share similar values, and both sides are always chasing wealth, at least to some degree, leaving both sides to quietly wonder amongst themselves, who's really richer, Canadians or Americans? Kind of like two siblings who always fight, wondering who's doing better financially. While the answer might seem pretty clear-cut, it's actually not that simple. Sure, we share similar things such as lifestyle, people, borders, geography, and Ryan Reynolds. He has dual citizenship. He was actually born in Vancouver, Canada. That makes him ours. But also, we differ in some pretty critical ways, including wages, taxes, cost of living, and economic opportunities. In this video, I'm going to do a deep dive into the actual cost of living and wages, salaries, everything you can think of, comparing Canadians to Americans, so we can finally put an end to this and answer once and for all, who's really richer and better off financially, Canadians or Americans? If you're new to my channel, I'm Aaron, a 20-year corporate accountant and analyst. I spend a good chunk of my day analyzing and going over data and analytics very similar to this. So I'm going to do a deep dive, taking everything from spreadsheets to the Fraser Institute of Research and comparing analytics, everything you could think of, so I can give you an in-depth analysis. So if you live in Canada and you're tired of the very, very cold weather that we have, and the cost of living and the outrageous housing prices, and are thinking of moving to the States, retiring there, visiting, having dual citizenship, whatever, or you're thinking of moving from America, you've had the American dream, and you want to come up north to Canada and experience the Canadian dream, well, this video is for you. Key differences between the US and Canada are taxation. Canada generally has higher income taxes and a more extensive social welfare system, while the US relies on lower taxes with less emphasis on universal benefits. Healthcare costs. Canada provides publicly funded healthcare, significantly reducing individual medical expenses, whereas healthcare in the US is largely privatized and more costly for individuals. Economic opportunities. The US has a much larger, more diverse economy with higher earning potential in certain industries, while Canada's economy is smaller but offers a more stable job market with less income inequality. If we look into a study by the Fraser Institute, Canada's rising personal tax rates and falling tax consequences 2024, the executive summary states taxes from 2009 to 2023, taxes have increased in every province, with Newfoundland and Labrador at 23%, 15% in Ontario, and 10% in Quebec. This reduces the reward for economic growth and prosperity. The federal and provincial increases to Canada's marginal income tax rates from 2009 to 2023 have put the country at a greater competitive disadvantage for attracting and retaining skilled labor and, less directly, investment and entrepreneurs. Taken together, Canada's personal income tax rates are decidedly uncompetitive when compared to the United States. This puts Canada in an uncompetitive position as they try to grapple with persistent deficits and mounting debt, and since higher income earners change their behavior in response to higher tax rates, higher taxes probably won't be that effective except in taxing the middle class. Here's a comparison of both Canadian provinces and US states put together in order of their marginal tax rate, with, as you can see, Canada pretty much having every province at the top except for 5 states beating out Saskatchewan. After that, every other state is lower, dropping from the next state, Oregon, at 46.9% down to the lowest being Alaska at 37%. For each income category, Canadians that earn $300,000 to $150,000 to $75,000 to $50,000, you'll most likely be paying at the very least 2 to 5% more in Canada on taxes at a minimum. If you made $300,000 in some states, you'd pay 32%, or an average of about 37% in the US, where you would pay about 47% in Canada. If you made $75,000 in the US, you would pay as little tax as 22%, with an average around 27%, whereas in Canada, you would be paying around 34% in taxes. Not a huge difference, but it's enough.
Salary ranges. Canada versus the United States.
If we look at the average salary ranges throughout Canada, you'll notice that they are pretty similar and there's not a lot of variances between provinces. The average salary ranges from $56,000 in Prince Edward Island to $67,000 in Alberta, with Northwest Territories, of course, paying the most, but the cost of living is far more expensive. The average salary is about $55,000 to $105,000 in 2024, with the average minimum wage at $17.30. Here's a breakdown of some of the top paying jobs in Canada as of 2024, with surgeons and data scientists earning the most, and a breakdown of the average earnings by year by age group, with Canadians aged 45 to 54 years old earning the highest income average of about $67,000 per year. Now to the US. You can see the United States has a wide range of median salaries, with the lower end being $47,000 going up to $162,000. If you look close, you'll see the median salaries fluctuate from $4,000 from neighboring states to pretty much double if we travel across the country, and some a lot lower. Wage ranges in the US tend to show greater extremes and variability compared to Canada, where salaries, while varying by province, are generally more consistent and display a narrower range across the country as a whole. And this is in US currency, meaning these salaries would be higher if we factored in the exchange rate.
And now, 3 city comparisons, apples to apples.
So for my first 2 cities, I've chosen to compare Calgary to Denver. My thought process is, well, they have relatively similar climates, they're both driven by oil and gas, they both support financial and professional services, and they have a relatively similar population size. Calgary and Denver offer a mix of urban amenities and outdoor lifestyles, making them attractive to young professionals and families. For my second city comparison, I'll be taking Toronto and not comparing it to New York, as many people compare it to New York. However, they are nothing alike. New York is its own mega hub that stands on its own, like it's enormous. I'll be comparing Toronto to Chicago, as both cities have similar climate and geography, being located near large freshwater lakes, Lake Ontario and Lake Michigan, and humid summers and cold, snowy winters. Economy. Toronto is Canada's financial capital, home to major banks and the Toronto Stock Exchange. Chicago is a major U.S. financial hub known for its commodity exchanges and diverse economy, which includes manufacturing and technology. Culture and diversity. Toronto is one of the most multicultural cities globally, with a strong focus on arts, theater, and film. Chicago is famous for its music, particularly jazz and blues, as well as its deep dish pizza and architectural history. Scale. Chicago is slightly larger in population and economic size, but Toronto is rapidly growing as Canada's largest city and hub for international migration. For my third city comparison, I'll be comparing Vancouver to San Diego. Geography and climate. Both cities have temperate coastal climates with mild winters. Vancouver receives more rainfall, while San Diego is drier and sunnier. Economy. Vancouver has a strong focus on trade via its ports, natural resources, and film production, while San Diego's economy leans on biotech, defense, and tourism. Lifestyle. Both cities emphasize outdoor lifestyles, with Vancouver being a gateway to skiing, hiking, and water sports, while San Diego offers beaches, surfing, and year-round warm weather. Housing. Both cities face high housing costs. Vancouver is among the least affordable cities in Canada, while San Diego has some of the highest real estate prices in the US. Hey, do me a favor, if you feel like you're getting something out of this video, would you hit the like button, as I put a lot of research into every video I make, and it really helps support the channel. Much appreciated.
Here we go. Segment 1, wages and job opportunities.
So for wage and salary comparisons, what I'll be doing is taking what a person makes in Canadian dollars, CAD, and comparing them to what someone would make in America using, well, USD currency, because, well, that's where they live, that's what currency they're paying their expenses in. After taking into account federal and provincial taxes for each city, you will notice, according to Indeed and salary experts, Wages in the US are often higher across several industries. For instance, the average salary in Calgary is $63,000 per year, while Denver is $10,000 higher at $73,000 USD. Tech hubs like Vancouver are at $69,500, while San Diego is $10,000 higher at $80,000. Toronto, a major financial center, sees average salaries around $70,000 Canadian, while Chicago offers $5,000 more at $75,000 USD. So when I go in and put in all the federal, provincial, or state taxes for all 6 cities, and then subtract off FICA, Social Security, and Medicare from each gross income, I get the total amount in taxes paid in each city on average, then the remaining net income, and finally, the difference. You'll notice for every city that net income is consistently higher in the US than it is in Canada. People, on average, have a higher net income of $4,100 more in Chicago than in Toronto, $7,400 more in San Diego, and $8,700 more in Denver. The two main reasons are that their gross incomes are higher before any taxes are taken off, but then, in addition to that, the total tax, both federal and provincial state tax, which I included FICA, Social Security, and Medicare, is comparable or lower than the taxes paid in Canada. Why the difference? The US economy has a broader industrial base with significant representation in tech, finance, and healthcare. Additionally, the sheer scale of companies headquartered in the US, like Apple, Google, and Amazon, creates a wealth of high-paying jobs that Canada simply can't match. The US also has a more mobile workforce, allowing people to move more quickly where opportunities are more abundant. In contrast, Canada's economy is heavily tied to natural resources and commodities, which can limit its industrial diversity. While cities like Toronto and Vancouver offer competitive opportunities in finance and tech, they lack the sheer volume and variety seen in the US cities. However, there's a lot more to this. We can't just look at a person's gross income. We also have to consider expenses, cost of living, taxes, as it's not just what you make, but what you take home that really counts. So, taking those 6 net incomes that I calculated earlier for the average person that lives in Calgary, Denver, Vancouver, San Diego, Toronto, and Chicago, and then I calculated out what would the average annual expenses be for the average person. So I took into account if they lived in a detached home. What would their annual mortgage payment be? How much would they spend on utilities, property tax, phone, cable, internet, gas, a bus pass, the average food, clothing, home insurance, private insurance, out-of-pocket costs, and I arrived at the final calculation. And on the far right, you'll see the remaining amount of net income left. No matter how I crunch these numbers, how many times I go over the data, I keep arriving at the same conclusion that I pretty much have negatives for all of these net incomes. However, then it occurred to me, oh, well, I'm just taking into account one person living on their own with no roommates. It's not a couple. And they only have an average salary, and they're living in some of the most expensive cities in both countries. So I figured, why not take a couple or family and do a comparison that way? So I delve into the data more, compared what would happen if it was 2 people or a family. So certain things like variable expenses, well, they'll go up, such as food, utilities. However, other fixed or semi-fixed expenses like mortgage costs, insurance, well, they'll remain the same, most likely go down, or even probably be cut in half.
Here are the calculations and resulting conclusions Aaron reached for the average expenses for a family or couple living in each of these 6 cities, which is based on the previous average net incomes.
Number 1, housing is of course the biggest factor, and the fact that a detached home is consistently more expensive in Canada than the US doesn't help, especially when we get hit with the second whammy of 2, incomes are also higher by on average $2,000 to $6,000 in each city. 3, now Canadians spend on average $2,000 to $3,000 per year on out-of-pocket healthcare expenses after their insurance coverage has been taken off, such as dental and prescriptions, while Americans spend anywhere from $13,000 to $14,000 on out-of-pocket costs, which I'll touch on more in a second. However, 4, These additional healthcare costs are partially offset by 1, higher incomes, like I stated, and 2, lower food costs, roughly 20 to 30% cheaper, and lower taxes, with the average American paying roughly $1,000 to $3,000 less than the average Canadian. However, I can tell you, delving into this data, that this is what the average person in Canada and the US spends on basic necessities. These are just the basic necessities. However, let's dive more into the details. Now, some of these ending expenses might seem a little bit on the higher side. However, I did not take into account a number of miscellaneous expenses that everyday people incur every month, such as what does a woman spend on beauty products per month? How much does a couple spend going out to the movies? I'd be working through various scenarios, so I just figured I'm not even going to take that into account at all. So if these net income amounts seem a little high, that's the reason. Also, looking at these 6 major cities, no surprise, Calgary and Denver are by far the most affordable. One of the biggest differences that I noticed was right here at the end, with healthcare premiums and out-of-pocket costs, which can quickly become expensive for just the average person. I see $7,000 for Denver for the average person per year, and compare that to Calgary, which is only $1,500 per year. San Diego, again, you're looking at $6,500, but in Vancouver, only $1,800. Still a lot of money, but a lot more affordable. Here is the reason why.
Drum roll, segment 2, taxes and social benefits.
Canadians generally pay higher taxes than Americans. The average income tax rate in Canada for middle-income earners is around 20 to 25%, but this can climb to above 30% when provincial taxes are included. In contrast, American middle-income earners face federal tax rates of 12 to 22%, while state taxes vary widely. For example, Texas has no state income tax, while California's state tax rates can go as high as 13%. But what do Canadians get for higher taxes? Universal healthcare. Canadians get to experience many universal healthcare coverages, while Americans pay a lot more for surgeries, prescription drugs, having a child than a Canadian would. The average American family spends about $5,000 USD annually on health insurance premiums, while the average Canadian family contributes to healthcare through taxes. Wait times for specialized care in Canada can be longer than the US, which offers faster access at a higher cost. Another key difference is retirement. Canadians contribute to the Canada Pension Plan, CPP, which provides retirement benefits, while Americans rely on Social Security. The CPP is funded conservatively and is projected to remain sustainable for decades. However, Social Security faces potential funding challenges unless reforms are implemented. In Canada, much of our healthcare is publicly funded and covered. So hospital visits, doctor visits, surgeries, all of that is covered under our universal umbrella of healthcare coverage. However, some people have to seek out private insurance for dental, prescription drugs, additional coverage above and beyond what is covered for a normal person. But much of the coverage that someone would need in Canada is usually covered by their provincial healthcare system, such as Alberta Health Services. Canada. Public healthcare costs cover most essential services, but private insurance is necessary for things like dental, vision, and prescription drugs. The total cost is lower in Canada because of the publicly funded system. USA. The healthcare system is primarily private and costs can be much higher, especially for individuals without employer-sponsored insurance or government assistance. When I was younger, and even now, when I talk to my friends, neighbors, whoever, and mention, well, I'm thinking of going to the US, visiting, I've heard for 20, 30 years, everybody tells me the same story. Oh, make sure that you have the proper insurance coverage. You don't want to get sick there. It could bankrupt you. Like, it's $10 for an aspirin. Everybody, all my friends that visit America, well, we always make sure to have proper insurance coverage because we know healthcare in the US is outrageously costly. In case we haven't met, I'm Aaron, a 20-year corporate accountant and analyst living in Western Canada. I talk about personal finance and investing. I have the experience and the academic education to back up what I'm saying. If this sounds like something you'd be interested in, consider subscribing to my channel. In this study, proposed by the Fraser Institute, titled Our Incomes Are Falling Behind, this chart, titled Median Earnings Comparing Canada to the US in Canadian dollars, based on 2022 census data, you'll notice that in every province, it's behind the US. BC and Alberta are the highest, around 38 to 39,000, and below Florida at 40,800. And the US earnings per state just go up from there. You'll also see in Figure 5 when we compare 4 Canadian provinces to 4 US states. This yellow indicator marks the changes in salaries from 2010 to 2022, and you'll notice there is a greater level of change on the American side than on the Canadian side. In 12 years, incomes in Saskatchewan have barely budged, increasing only $961 in total over 12 years. If we use a very conservative inflation indicator of only 2%, which actual inflation is often much higher, over 12 years, a person's actual salary at 2% per year would actually be $43,083, $8,000 more than the average worker is receiving now. And can you believe it? In Alberta, over 12 years, incomes have actually gone down, decreased $1,555. People are actually losing money. You'll see the same scenario when we compare poorer provinces in Canada to poorer American states. Granted, there is less of a variance, but on average, it's about a $2,000 difference in favor of the United States.
On to segment 3, cost of living and quality of life.
Cost of living is another critical factor. On average, housing is more expensive in Canada, especially in cities like Vancouver and Toronto, where the average home price exceeds $1 million Canadian. The US does have some expensive cities, such as San Diego, where the average home price is approximately $1,005,000 USD. Meanwhile, the median home price in Denver is around $600,000 USD, and in Chicago is $300,000 USD. Other costs such as groceries and utilities are higher than Canada. Unfortunately, I understand why, due to mainly import costs and less foreign domestic suppliers. Yet some Canadians actually report a higher level of satisfaction. Why? Canada's social safety nets, including the Canadian Pension Plan (CPP) and Employment Insurance (EI), offer financial stability. Additionally, Canada's lower crime rates, robust public education system, and emphasis on work-life balance contribute to a higher perceived quality of life. For families, Canada's generous parental leave policies and subsidized childcare programs are a major advantage over the US. However, the US excels in affordability of everyday goods. Just look at food prices, gasoline, and this is primarily due to larger domestic markets and having more competition in the US than there is in Canada. I actually made a great video on this very subject as to why we have, so little competition in Canada. If you're interested, I'll link that up above right here. District Judge Ahmet Mehta ruled that Google was a monopolist and acted as one to maintain a monopoly in that sector. This was a surprise to absolutely no one, but at the same time was a shocker to everyone.
Here is segment 4, family life. What if you have a family or want to have a family?
Daycare costs, total pregnancy and delivery costs, $12,000 to $30,000, with out-of-pocket expenses averaging $4,500 to $6,000 for insured families. For an average family, the total cost of having a child, pregnancy, delivery, preparation, and immediate post-birth expenses range from $15,000 to $40,000. With insurance, out-of-pocket expenses typically range between $8,000 to $12,000. One major factor is daycare that I did not take into account when I constructed this chart. It used to be really expensive in Canada. However, it is getting cheaper. Somewhat. They are rolling out new programs. I should know. I have a set of twins. In 2024, the Canadian government expanded its $10 a day childcare program, aiming to reduce average childcare fees to $10 a day by March 2026. Here's a chart showing the average of what a person pays for daycare. This again is slowly being rolled out, and it will vary province by province, but on average, This is what the average family pays for daycare. In contrast, the United States does not have a comparable nationwide program. Childcare costs in the US remain high, averaging $10,000 to $20,000 per year. However, legislative efforts are underway to address this issue. For instance, Representative Ro Khanna proposed a bill to cap childcare costs at $10 per day for families earning under $250,000 annually, inspired by Canada's system. This proposal envisions a $100 billion annual investment to alleviate the financial burden on American families.
Segment 5. Investment Opportunities.
The U.S. offers unparalleled investment opportunities. With access to the world's largest stock market, Americans can invest in global giants like Apple, Tesla, and Microsoft. Canada's stock market is more resource-heavy, focusing on oil, gas, and mining companies, which can limit diversification. Moreover, Americans benefit from tax advantage accounts like 401ks and IRAs, while Canadians use RRSPs and TFSAs. Both systems encourage retirement savings, but the U.S. accounts often allow for higher contribution limits. One striking difference is innovation. The U.S. leads in sectors like technology, healthcare, and renewable energy, attracting both domestic and international investors. In contrast, Canada's investment landscape is more conservative, offering stability over rapid growth. Hey, if you want to sign up and become a subscriber, guess what? It's a free membership. You just have to hit the subscribe button below.
The final chapter. Segment 6. Debt Summary.
To quote the Fraser Institute, the debt burden for families across Canada has been growing substantially for more than a decade. Since 2007 and 2008, total net debt, inflation adjusted, has nearly doubled in absolute dollar terms. Rising government debt has severe consequences for Canadians as more and more resources are directed toward interest payments and away from programs that help families or improve Canada's economic competitiveness.
Here are the reasons why the U.S. is considered to be in a better position than Canada regarding debt levels. These debt levels trickle down to the residents of those countries. 1. Global reserve currency status. 2. Depth and liquidity of financial markets. 3. Economic size and diversification. 4. Productivity and GDP per capita. 5. Investor confidence and fiscal credibility. While both Canada and the US must manage their debt levels prudently, the US is generally seen as better off with higher debt levels due to its global financial influence, the status of the dollar, a vast and diversified economy, and strong institutional credibility. Increased productivity and higher GDP per capita do play a role, but they are part of a broad set of factors, including market depth, investor confidence, and fiscal policy that allow the American government to handle an increased amount of debt more effectively than Canada.
Conclusion. Who is richer, Canadians or Americans, and what type of person is the best fit for each country?
Why I selected these 3 cities in each country and put them side by side is people are who they are, and they usually gravitate towards things that are familiar to them. So if a certain city is cheaper or it's where they think they want to live, people often find they gravitate towards something that they're familiar with. They like the lifestyle that's similar to where they grew up, whatever. So these 3 cities I found as a real great comparison. So if someone's looking to retire, move, whatever the case may be, this would be the most identifiable city in each country. Lifestyle is a big major factor of deciding where we want to live, and we can't discount that, right? Most people want to go someplace they're familiar with that kind of reminds them of home, where they feel comfortable, and they'd much rather take that and live in a city that's maybe a bit more expensive or slightly different climate, whatever, but the lifestyle is familiar and they're accustomed to it. So in conclusion, are Americans financially better off than Canadians? Well, short answer is yes, they actually are. However, the long answer is, well, it's a bit more complicated. They do, in the end, take home more, have a higher net income than Canadians by several $1,000s. However, they don't get to enjoy that universal healthcare coverage. They don't have that social security blanket that we have in Canada. So if you're a bit more outgoing, robust, you're young, you're energetic, you want to make a name for yourself and, take the plunge, maybe America is better for you. However, if you feel like you like that security, you don't want to have that worry in case you lose your job, something happens, you have health problems, whatever, and you like that extra security, well then maybe Canada is a better fit for you after all. So should you move to the US or to Canada? What country is better suited for what type of person? Move to the US if you're in relatively good health. Compared with the average person, you're somewhat of a risk taker, you're a high income earner, and you enjoy a more fast-paced lifestyle. The lower taxes, cheaper housing, food, utilities, etc. will benefit you in the long run. However, you might want to move or stay in Canada if you're in a lower income tax bracket, you have a few more health issues than the average person would, and you prefer a slower, gradual, easygoing lifestyle over the fast-paced lifestyle of the US. You will benefit more from Canada's social safety nets. So many ambitious, high-income earners often see more opportunity in the US. This is why Canada loses so many great people, what is called brain drain. Now, it's no secret of the cost of living and housing crisis in Canada. However, we do have some things going for us. We're recently just changed prime ministers, or going to be. And well, if you come up here, you can pet a moose or a beaver. And we have great people as well. Canada actually does have quite a bit to offer. Suppose you have an extra $5,000 and you're wondering, should I make an RRSP contribution or make an extra mortgage payment towards my house? I have a great video that explains what is the absolute best solution for most people.